Bienvenidos sean todos ustedes. Welcome everybody, and I hope you are already practicing your English because the rest of the show is going to be in this language, especially because we have an all-star talent in here. One of I want to say one of the most outstanding artists that you can see in any medium, because he doesn't only illustrate comic books, he also works in plenty of stuff. He has a lot of experience also doing work for cinema, working for advertising, and he was actually showing us something really amazing before we started the show, and we're going to share that with you. And allow me to introduce the magnificent Dan Fraga. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing very well. Muchas gracias.
Muchos de nada. Allow me to introduce the rest of the cast, and we have this is a show that is going to be taking place in 3D. We have Daniel Villamil, el Wookiee.
Hola, buenas noches.
And we also have Nightboy, also known as Richard Grayson, also known as Gilberto, also known as, I don't know, he has many identities.
I'm sorry, man. Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again.
Excellent. So, as I was mentioning at the beginning, we have the great honor to be talking with Dan. And we're going to be talking about some of his projects that he has done in the past, something that is actually going to be published in, pretty much you will be able to get it in the following weeks. And also I want to ask him about a lot of the work that he has done, but perhaps is not well known, because if you look in this case at a simple resource as the Internet Movie Database, if you look for Dan Fraga, you will see that he has a lot of experience, and not only, as I mentioned, comic book related. So he has been working in the art department. He has directed also in different titles. He created an animated series, if I'm not mistaken, characters from a series. So as a man of many talents, Dan, can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do, for example, in storyboards, in this case, perhaps for cinema, for advertising or something like that, about the storyboarding, and if there are some similarities or obviously differences with perhaps the work that our audience knows the best, which is your work in comic books?
Okay, that's a great question. What do they say? What is question? Is it preguntas?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Exacto.
Buenos preguntas. So storyboarding, which is really what I've been spending a lot of my time doing now, is it's an interesting sort of field to be in, where it's similar to comic books, is you're telling a story in sequential images that flow in a linear way, that evoke emotion and communicate ideas. That's kind of where the similarities end. So a comic book, you as an artist are wearing many hats that are equivalent in cinema. So as a comic book artist, you're the director, you're the locations person, you're the wardrobe, you're the cinematographer, and you're the actor. You know, you need to evoke emotion. You need to know the angle. You're also the hairstylist. If a woman has beautiful hair, you have to know how to draw that hair. So you're kind of on call to do everything as a comic book artist, and you're asked to do it on time. And so there's that aspect of it. I could get into the technical aspects of the fact that you're on a two-dimensional page, which leads to some graphic design to lead the person's eye through the page to the next page, to progress them not only in context of how you string the images together, but graphically how you guide them from the top left side of the page to the bottom right side of the page and up, and that sort of thing. So storyboards, on the other hand, like right now I'm storyboarding a TV show for DC Universe called Doom Patrol. And what I do for them is I create a visual reference for the rest of the crew to have an understanding of what they're getting into when they go to shoot, right? So I can't get into specifics, but I can get into specifics for something that's on air right now. So if you watch TV, you'll notice there's a Taco Bell ad for nacho fries that is like a very space oriented, like an action movie called The Retrieval, and they're trying to get the nacho fries back and whatever. So I storyboarded that, and what that does for different reasons is it helps communicate the director's thoughts to the agency, and the agency has been hired by Taco Bell. So Taco Bell hires them to come up with this idea to sell nacho fries. Nacho fries, the idea is cultivated at an agency. That agency goes out, hires a production company to execute this idea in a way that surpasses the creativity of the agency. And what happens is they hire a storyboard artist to work in conjunction with the director, and the director communicates those ideas through words. As a storyboard artist, I'm to interpret those words and those scripts into pictures. So it's like a comic book of the commercial. So you look at it and you go, oh, okay, we see a guy walking towards camera. We see military people walking towards his house. So we get an understanding of before any money is spent, we get the understanding of what this commercial is supposed to be. So what those storyboards do, not only do they tell the story of what this thing is supposed to be in a very inexpensive way, they tell the casting people, we need to cast this many people. They tell the camera crew, we need this equipment to shoot on that day. They tell the AD, the assistant director, how much time he'll need during however much that day is that they're going to shoot. And all of that equals money that the producer is watching. And he goes and he looks at those storyboards and goes, this shot, this will cost this much. So they're able to accurately assess how much the thing will cost, how long it'll take, and what it is that they'll shoot. So the idea of storyboards is a tool to communicate to across many departments what they're going to be doing.
All right.
So that's a long answer.
No, but actually it's excellent, because this way, for a lot of people, it might seem that there are similar, in this case, similar graphic expressions, but the purpose of the final purpose that you have for this actually allows you to create different ways of communicating an idea. In this case, you have to be really clear for the rest of the crew. But for example, and with comic books, you are like, as you mentioned, the director of the entire sequence, and you have to use, in this case, the page, the format, as the way of telling a story through space and not through time, which usually is like one of the differences.
Exactly. That is the biggest difference, and there are ways to fake it, right? So for storyboards, you're kind of locked down to a set aspect ratio. It's 16:9. It's 2:35, 2:0. 4:3, those sort of, that's the shape of your panel, right? And timing is dictated through editing, whereas with comic books, it's the size and shape of the panel in context to the things around it.
All right, so there you have one actually something that it's really good for the audience to know. I believe that we're going to go a little bit more about perhaps graphical work, comic book work. And Nightboy, do you have the following question?
Yeah, you just mentioned that the time reference between what you do on storyboards and what you do on comic books, and the similarities between them. What has been the most challenging work you have been doing, taking as a reference when you first started, when you started working with Rob Liefeld, and then all the time that you spent with DC Comics, with Marvel Comics, with Image Comics, Valiant? I think that you work for Valiant too.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I'll use the word yet.
Okay. That's what I was about to say. And you're working on productions like DC Universe, the streaming service, with Doom Patrol. What has been the most challenging work you have been presented with?
I guess it's different. It's different for each thing. So for storyboarding, the most challenging work that I do is for a director named Joseph Kahn. and Joseph does a lot of music videos for like Taylor Swift and Britney Spears, Eminem, and does a lot of commercial work. And the commercials that he does are usually very innovative and require a lot of thinking. They're not very straightforward concepts that are, you know, you can put them in a box. They're very out of the box, challenging things. So working for Joseph is always challenging, but I also find to be the most fun because they make my head hurt a lot of the time, which is okay. Comic book wise, what I end up doing to myself, comic book wise, is I paint myself into these things called detail corners. So like I just did this GI Joe cover, and the editors had asked me, you know, what would you like to do, and I throw them some things, and one of the things that stuck out to them is I said I wanted to do a cover with the Cobra twins, Tomax and Zaymon, and they were attracted to that because nobody ever says I want to draw a Tomax and Zaymon cover, you know. And they said, oh, I really want to see this. And so I said, I'm going to have them fall out of a building, you know, falling, and glass will be falling, and their, you know, buildings are down below them. And I made this commitment because I saw this image in my head. But what ends up happening is my brain comes up with these things that, like, you know, we have the voices in our head. One of them goes, yeah, this is so awesome. You need to do this. And the other one says, "Are you crazy? Like, what? Are you really thinking of doing that?" And then I have to do it because I say I'm gonna, and I do it. So the challenge is really executing these things that sometimes that my creative brain puts these things just inches beyond my actual ability. And I have to push myself to achieve it.
All right. And we have the following question coming from the other part of the 3D team. Wookie, your question.
Yes, about the Ricky Gervais show.
Yes.
How was direct the series when a lot of several parts were already recorded?
That's a great question too. So the process for the Ricky Gervais show, as you mentioned, is the Ricky Gervais show had these podcasts that were very successful and people had listened to, and the challenge is how are we going to make a cartoon that supports these recordings in a way that's new and fresh? And the answer is the writer, this guy named Steve Patrick. He would listen to these things and come up with these fantastic scenarios while listening to the podcast. And what he would do is he would write them down. Like as Ricky's talking about, you know, this thing, the visuals in his mind he sees are this. So then he would write these things as scripts, and then I would take them and interpret them and communicate them to the storyboard team. And we would try to support the podcast with visuals that that didn't just support what the audio was saying, but also created a new dimension. And the reason I was hired, I was brought in season 2 and season 3 is I wanted to create, knowing that they had very simple, limited animation, I wanted to breathe life into those things by studying the way the actual people moved. So we being the animators and the storyboard artists studied the way Steven and Carl and Ricky moved and why and those sort of things, so that when we actually did it, that the thing felt alive. So long story short is our fantastic writer Steve Patrick would listen to the things, see things in his mind, write them down. I would then interpret them along with my team, and we would animate it and then put it out.
All right, we have it in there. And I want to perhaps go back a little bit to the process that is behind any of these other creations. And also I want to mention a couple of places where people can follow you that I really enjoy, because you see, in some occasions part of the process, and obviously the final result. In Instagram, people can follow you really easily, and they just have to search for Coach Doodles, where they can find part of your art. Which, believe me, guys, it's really amazing. You can see part of the processing here, and also. Something that we were also talking before, just right before the transmission, your YouTube channel, which you can also find it with the very same name, where you you share a lot of videos, and we understand that there are a lot of more videos coming with different aspects of art. So can you tell us a little bit about what is the deal with Coach Doodles?
I can give you sort of the story behind the name, and then I'll tell you what my philosophy is, and then I'll tell you the plan. So I used to have an Instagram called Fraga Boom, and in late 2012 there was a story going around that Instagram would be able to use your content freely and without your permission, and I got really angry, so I deleted my account. And then they said it's not true, so I went to reinstate my account, and I couldn't. So I had to come up with a new name, and I had a new baby at the time, so we spent a lot of time on the couch. Our together time was on the couch, the wife and the baby and myself, and I did a lot of the drawing that I would post on the couch. So I said, I doodle while on the couch, couch doodles. So that's the idea behind the name. But eventually what had happened when I would meet people out at shows, or I would talk to people about sort of my philosophy of things, is I realized the need for creating freely, to have being able to freely express yourself creatively without any sort of barriers. And I know from experience that I would have artist block and idea block and all these things that would pop up that would hinder the way I would get my ideas out. And I thought after I went through all of this stuff, almost like Lewis and Clark and their expedition, creatively going through these things, I thought, you know what, I'd like to share the lessons that I learned so that people wouldn't have to go through, I mean, these are strong words, the pain and the suffering creatively to get to where I've gotten. If there are some shortcuts that I can give people, or some insights that I can give people to avoid this and focus on this, that sort of thing. So the creative tagline is to illuminate and empower creativity in others through example. So taking that idea of illuminating and empowering creativity in people, I thought, wouldn't it be great to interview other people that I admire, guys like Neil Adams, guys like Rob Liefeld, guys like Kim Jong-gi, Mike Mignola, Dennis Cowan, Steve Umbleby, Emily Kelly. And I haven't named them all, but I interviewed 17 people with the same series of questions. I had 13 questions that I asked everybody to get insight into their creative mind and how they create, and what things that they fear and things that they regret, and just sort of all the things that it took to get them to the place they're in, including Joseph Kahn, the guy I had talked about earlier, this director who's brilliant. I wanted to get insight into them. So that's what my show is about. And right now, when you go to the YouTube channel, you'll find some lessons, including, how to make a delicious dessert and things like that. But one of the things that kind of slowed me down, this is something that there's a saying, right? The best laid plans make the spirits laugh, right? Like if you go, the man's plans make the spirits laugh, because we can plan and do all the things we want to do, but things will happen. And what I mean by that is, like, as I'm on my way of doing these interviews and creating this content, I had some things, life had some unexpected curveballs. My wife got pregnant. My landlord decided to give our house to his son as a wedding gift. So we moved out here to Georgia. So, when you're creating content and you're sort of a one-man operation, things like moving cross country and having a baby and stuff kind of like throw things into turmoil. But fortunately, again, building log cabins with toothpicks, the mud is settling and things are getting up and going again. So the Couch Doodle show will be something to be watching very soon.
All right, guys. So please go and subscribe. Please do it. And perhaps the latest video, which is like I believe like 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, it was released.
Yeah.
You have a nice recipe of how to make a nito burrito. And as a Mexican, I am going to say that I approve it and I allow it. So you can go and enjoy this.
Gracias. Yeah. I appreciate that, man. The Nito burrito was invented like 25 years ago, and it's something that when I make new friends, I make one for them, and it's very specific, but they're very delicious and satisfying. I have to say.
Once you finish one of those, it must be a sugar rush like you wouldn't believe, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
For
so
sure.
Nightboy, we're going with you again for the second question that you have.
Yeah, I have actually said as usual. It's a two-part question.
Cheater.
As usual, you have been involved with all this superhero world or this fiction reality, so to call it, so to put it in a way. You have been with all the big companies in the comic book industry. You have been involved with the toy companies in creating stuff with, like you said, with Max Steel, with the High School Monster. No, is that
Monster High? Yeah, Ever After High. Yeah.
Yeah, and with all that licenses.
Yeah.
What's the driver inside you? What's your process? Is there any kind of challenge that you go through? Like, yeah, I haven't tried this, and I know I'm able to excel in what I'm about to do, or it's just I don't know what that sounds cool. I'm gonna do it because it's like it's unknown for me.
I think we talked earlier about mother of invention being necessity, and when I was a kid, I grew up on a chicken farm, and I did chores every day of the year. With a chicken coop and a large garden and a lot of birds and dogs, and we had a lot of animals and a bit of land to take care of. So I was in my head a lot, right? Like just inside my mind. And in fact, I had a radio that would play TV signals, so I would listen to cartoons and things like that. So I found that I was always trying to fill my head with things to do. My dad used to do this thing, like when we were bored, if we said the words "I'm bored," he would put us to work. He had something for us to do, and in fact, I put one of the things that we had to do in the grave. In the grave, I called it doing rocks, but in real life it was doing bricks. And we had this stack of like 500 bricks that were in this sort of very distinct arrangement, the way they were, almost like a mason would do. And my dad, if all the chores were done and we still said we were bored, we would have to move one brick at a time to the other corner of the property, walk it, stack, walk it, and it would take all day, right? And it was like, it was just work that didn't need to be done, but it was something that was very tedious that he would have us do. So to answer your question, my brain is always on the quest to find the next thing to expand itself, right? So I love drawing, I love storytelling, and I remember back in like 1999, I spent a lot of my time when I was drawing comics watching MTV and watching music videos and starting to notice like certain names would pop up on the ones I liked, and then I would ask myself the question, why do I like this? And I would start to write down like, oh, this is very graphic, or this person does this thing and there's a clean look to this. And I started noticing these things, and then when I started storyboarding, I started working for these people, and I started asking them questions like, why did you do this? And and then I took those things with me, that the next time I got a job where I was in a position like directing like they were, I had the answers to the questions that I had, so then I can move that along. And then there was these sort of natural progressions of, okay, I learned this. I want to understand when we go into a mix, like what's happening sound wise. Why are we doing this when we're doing it? Like I have to have the understanding of what I want, but I need to know it on a technical level. And then I take that skill with me on to the next thing I do. So it's almost like a shitty monster, right? Like a 50s monster. I gotta learn, and I need to know. But the answer is literally like, my brain is so hungry all the time to know more, and what I try to do along the way is I discard the stuff that I think is garbage, and I keep the stuff that I think is gonna work, and I move forward. And I have heroes that did the same thing, guys like Bruce Lee. Like I love Bruce Lee, and I've admired Bruce Lee since I was a young kid. And that essentially is the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, is absorb what is useful and discard what isn't. But again, I'm getting into long answers, but that's the answer is I have a voracious appetite to learn.
I think that there's no short answer for
Yeah.
it. And the second part of the question, now that you have been on every part of the creative process, so in comic books or in animation or in live action process, if you could have three creatives, a writer, an artist, and an inker, to have your perfect comic book, who should they be?
Oh, as far as me as a fan?
Yeah, well, you as an editor.
Man, that's tough, because like I could say as a penciler and an inker on anything that I want to see done, it's gonna sound crazy, but I'd want it to be me. Yeah. And that was a very strange transition for me to have. Like I remember I wrote it down on a piece of paper because to me it felt profound, and in a certain way it sounds like some crazy ego shit, but it's the most empowering thing creatively that I can ever imagine, because as a fan, as an artist, I was always searching outside of myself for what I call the dopeness. Like we all have names, like the cool shit, the goods, the dopeness. And I remember writing down, whenever I want the dopeness, it's me that must provide it, right? Like, so I know that, like, take a character like the Green Goblin. I have certain guys that I go, oh, Todd McFarlane's Green Goblin is fucking awesome. And Art Adams' Green Goblin is awesome and all this. But then I go, but if I want the most awesome Green Goblin, I'm going to do it. Right? Like, so, like, and I know, because I know what I want from them, that I have to be the one to provide that. But if you're asking, like, strictly as a fan, like what I want, I'd want, and then I'd have to provide years too, because, and this is going to be like the jerk part of me, and hopefully these guys don't see this broadcast, but I would say a Stan Lee written Michael Golden pencil, Michael Golden inked, but Michael Golden from 1983. That's what I'd want, and I'd want it to be something Spiderman with Doctor Strange, and Daredevil and the Hulk.
So pretty much like the Marvel way.
Yeah. I mean,
And
you know what's funny is I just ordered. So I learned a lot from my grandfather, and I also learned from this book called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Yeah.
And I have the copy that I had since I was like maybe 10 years old or whatever, and it's signed by Stan Lee, and it's beat up, right? It's a paperback copy, but I found on Amazon you can buy the book and you can have it library bound.
Yeah.
So I had it. I got this one. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's yeah. I'm really happy to have this because I still go back to it, you know. But the answer is that. But I have a sidebar because I actually thought your question was going to go somewhere different.
No. Actually, it was like, what were your preferences? Because with that, you just said is like we already know what kind of writer do you stories you enjoy from, like
Yeah. Well, I like Stan Lee. I like Chris Claremont, Roger Stern. I like when Jack Kirby was doing stuff. Frank Miller in certain the stuff that we all love. The Frank Miller stuff that we all love is the stuff I love. But where I thought your question was going to go, and it's the reason I thought this is because it's been on my mind a lot. It's because somebody else had asked me. They said, you've written comics, you've drawn comics, you've worked as a creator, you've worked as a storyboard artist, as a director, as a supervising director, all of these things. Like, if I could spend all day doing something, what would it be? Right? Like, out of all of it, what would it be that I want? And the answer is I would like to do my YouTube show, and do one amazing graphic novel a year, like 100-page one of them every year until I can't draw anymore, until I can't see, whatever, but one a year. Like the Grave, and like I have this Black Flag one that I'm working on right now. I would like to do one of those a year where I can put my passion and love and heart into it, and then spend the time when I go to comic conventions interviewing these terrific, fantastic, creative geniuses and learning. Going back to that monster I told you that wants to know. I ask these questions. Not only because I think my audience wants to hear them, but because I want to hear them. I want to know, like, so the answer to these things. So I can add to my Jeet Kune Do formula of what I can do.
Actually, that's pretty much the long why of the question is because now that we know that you like the way Stanley writes, the way Mr. Golden draws and inks, we kind of know what are your reference, what are your inspirations, so to call. What you're looking inside the 50-head monster that is inside your brain every time that you write a story, or that you are directing, or that you are storyboarding. So we kind of know what drives you every time.
Well, that's just comic book references, though, man.
Yeah.
Like I go to guys like Spielberg and Scorsese and Tarantino for different reasons. Like Spielberg because he knows what people want. He knows how to almost be a conductor of people's emotions, and he does it through a series of almost mathematical equations visually, right? Like you can communicate ideas in a certain way. You look at someone like Scorsese, and he's very guttural. You look at someone like Tarantino, and it's very natural, and and very human natured, and got a sort of a hint of cool to it. So there's all those things film wise. But like if we talk about comic book stuff, you know, my guys, like my family tree would be like John Byrne, Frank Miller, Todd McFarlane, Arthur Adams, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Michael Golden, Jack Kirby, a pinch of Mignola, a pinch of Kevin Nolan. But like the major keys would be like McFarlane, Art Adams, those, Walt Simonson, those guys.
All right. We have one final question in this case from Daniel from El Wookie.
Yeah.
Something that you can ask Daniel?
Yeah, I want to know about the Grave, your latest project.
Yeah.
How born the idea?
You want to hear the idea of it? So basically,
how you became with the project?
So basically, the idea of the Grave came to me. I was thinking about life, right? Like and how we travel through life, and how some of us can go through life and learn nothing, and then when we're on our deathbed, be filled with regrets because we don't know what it feels like to love, or we don't know what it feels like to have done the thing that we didn't do, so we have regrets and things like that. And then I thought about the life of someone that when they die, they feel like, I had a great life, right? Like things were great. And so then I found a Mark Twain quote that kind of represented that idea of a man who's lived his life fully has nothing to fear when he dies. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's essentially what he says. And then I thought about my time in life where I felt like those doors felt like the beginning, first steps into the idea of living life happened. And I remember it was going from 8th grade to 9th grade, going from junior high to high school, and kind of how the boys to men aspect of things. And I thought about my friendships at the time and the things we were into, the comics and the movies and things. So I kind of took the one idea of living life fully and the other idea and mashed them together. And so we have the story of this kid named Emmett, who was born covered in hair, right? He was covered in hair like a dog boy during the Depression era, and his parents sell him to the circus. And this guy, Slim Shekel, he runs this circus, and he's kind of a dastardly guy who's all about the money. And anyhow, we begin the Grave with the death of Emmett. We get to see somebody put a stick right through his heart. And we then, a la like a Tarantino film or a Guy Ritchie film, I mess with time. I go back and forth through time. I go to 1989, which was one of my favorite years, and I talk about these kids that are on their last day of summer vacation before they become freshmen in high school, and they stumble upon the shallow grave of this Emmett character. And through a series of events and different objects, I tell the story of how Emmett got to be there. And we see that, he has lived a life complete, and he has lived a life fully, though some would look at it and call it a tragic life. Other people that could see it would see that he could die as a young man, fully experiencing all that life has to offer, therefore having a complete life. So that's kind of how the Grave came about. It was just one of those sort of like, what do they call it? Inner dialogues, like, what am I here for? And, that sort of thing. And then the story kind of expanded from there.
All right. And if people want to see more about this, it's really easy to find that they can follow you in let's say like your public places in social networks, as we mentioned, in Instagram, in Coach Doodles, obviously in YouTube. And please guys, subscribe, because a lot of cool stuff is going to come into this channel. They can also follow you on Twitter as Fraga Boom,
Yes.
Dan Fraga. And
Yeah.
the most important thing, a couple of things in here. This title, The Grave, is going to be available. If you cannot get a physical copy, don't worry, because you can also buy a digital version in Amazon, in Comixology. However, the thing that if you are in the United States, Dan was mentioning that there is a particular presentation that is going to be taking place in Flying Colors, right? Actually, they did an interview with you, I believe that yesterday.
Yeah, it was last week. Yeah.
Last week.
Yeah.
So and they published it yesterday, where there are more details about this. And also one thing that I'm really excited is that you are going to be in there when they are going to start selling this book in there. You're going to be also doing some doodles, some art in this case for the copies.
So they are in California, and they are in my hometown area. And when I was a kid, I used to shop in that store. And Joe wanted me to come out there to do a signing, but I just had a kid. I just had a baby a month ago, so I'm not really doing a lot of travel. So he came up with this fantastic idea to do this book plate edition, which are these stickers that go on the inside page that have an exclusive image and my signature in them. So you can go to the Flying Colors blog, which has the information how to order for no extra money, except for shipping, obviously. But no extra charge. You get that special edition that's only available with him with a signed copy.
All right, so you can have there the very special edition in this case, and we were looking at some of the content in this case of the. Sorry, I'm switching pages really fast. Actually, in Instagram, they can find also some of the pages. So you already, if you know that, you know his art style, you know his imaginative work that he has been presenting in a lot of different medium. So the best way to actually support and get a part of, in this case, of his soul, of his creative talent, will be acquiring this book. And also, if you want perhaps to get something for the daily use, you can also buy some stuff, right, in coachdoodles.com, in case that you want perhaps a tote bag or a shirt. They can also find this stuff in there. So something that you recommend for the audience to buy in this case?
Well, the store is going to be updated very soon to feature original artwork as well. So just keep an eye. Just remembering Couch Doodles is a good way to think about it on Instagram and YouTube and on the store. And eventually, what I'll be putting out and putting together is all of the different information that I've amassed and creating sort of an almost how to draw the Couch Doodles way sort of book. So that'll be coming eventually as well.
All right, and with that, we are pretty much finishing the transmission in this case. Dan, thank you very much for sharing your time, your knowledge, and especially, well, your talent in this case with the conversation with all of us. And people, remember that if you want to perhaps to know more about Dan, we already mentioned some of the networks. Pretty much just search for him in any social network and you will find how to reach him. And that's pretty much everything that we have for you. Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you, of course, Gilberto and Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan, for joining us.
You're welcome. 3D for life, yo.
That's correct. That 3D represents. And well, that's pretty much everything for all the audience. We're going to have the video version. It's already available, but audio downloadable version will be available, I believe, that tomorrow, in case that you want to listen to it as a podcast. Thank you very much for all the patrons that are supporting this project. This is the kind of projects that we are able to realize, that we're able to make thanks to your support. So once again, thank you, everybody, and we will see each other in an upcoming transmission.
Adios.